The following conversations are taken from our channel membership exclusive weekly live show that we do on Saturdays from 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time called Members Talk Live. Find out how you can become a member and appear on the show. All of the information is down in the description below, as well as all of the links to the channels of today's guests. Check them out, and I hope to talk with you very soon. Welcome, guys. We are back. We are back talking Deadpool. Deadpool and Wolverine is less than 2 weeks away, so we got to kick this off. We're talking about Deadpool 2. We've got Ryan from Movie Reviews with Ryan Lane. We've got T from Have You Seen That with T joining us today. Fellas, Deadpool, the excitement, it just keeps ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. How are you guys feeling now that we're getting this close to Deadpool and Wolverine? How are you feeling, T?
I'm not going to lie. I'm a little nervous. The closer we get to it, I feel like ever since Multiverse of Madness, it's kind of tempered my expectations on movies because I was so excited for that movie. I don't think I've ever been as excited. Maybe when the prequel trilogy came out, I remember being really excited because we were getting new Star Wars content. And now every time there's like these huge movies coming out, I get nervous. Because I don't want it to disappoint me. I'm terrified it's going to disappoint me. And I don't think this is going to be a case. After rewatching Deadpool 2, I know that Ryan Reynolds gets it. So cautiously optimistic of this movie coming out.
I'm still pretty excited, although I do sympathize with T's trailer worries versus how the film actually turns out. I remember like years ago, the Don't Worry Darling movie. I remember the trailer looked so cool. And then I saw the movie, I was like, ooh, sophomore
I liked
slump
it.
to be real. Oh, really?
Yeah, I liked
it
Don't Worry,
too.
Darling.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
I didn't see it in the theater, but I enjoyed it.
But yeah, no, definitely the hype is crazy. The hype is high. It could definitely. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been seeing some of the reactions to the 35-minute showing that some critics got to see, or some fan event that happened overseas you got to see, where they basically said that it was just filled with nothing but laughs and applause for 35 minutes straight. So there's definitely, the hype is building. It could definitely go off the rails. But before we see Deadpool and Wolverine, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to 2018 when Deadpool 2 came out. So Deadpool 2, just taking us back to the landscape of when this came out, because Deadpool came out in 2016. We talked about last week. It was kind of an underdog movie, though. Like, Deadpool was not in the pulp culture zeitgeist. He wasn't that popular of a character outside of the comics and to hardcore comic fans. But after that first movie, Deadpool craze. I remember after Deadpool 1 came out, especially when we were ramping up to Deadpool 2 coming out, this movie was like talked about in every circle that I was a part of. People who didn't normally go to comic book movies were talking about going to see Deadpool 2. Like, Deadpool had just become this thing. It had outgrown just being a comic book niche thing. It was now a worldwide phenomenon. And just to take you guys back a little bit to what was going on in 2018 when Deadpool 2 came out in the landscape of superhero movies. In 2018, we also had Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Avengers Infinity War came out a month prior to Deadpool 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp, the phenomenon that was Black Panther. We had the start of the Sonyverse with Venom. We had Teen Titans Go to the Movies. We had Aquaman. And we had Deadpool 2 in the midst of all of that. So in that way of thinking, what stood out to you guys? Do you guys remember when Deadpool 2 was coming out? Like, do you remember if you guys were crazy hyped for it? Do you guys remember the excitement? Because I remember 2018 as the year of Infinity War, of just the Thanos snap and the heroes, and I forget that Aquaman came out in 2018. I'll be honest with you. Like Into the Spider-Verse was definitely one that surprised me in 2018, but I really don't think back to Deadpool 2 all that much when I think back to the comic book landscape of 2018, even though I did actually see this one in theaters. Before we start the conversation, though, we got Michael Entity joining us as well. Man, what's going on, dude?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Michael, do you remember when Deadpool 2 was coming out? Do you remember your excitement, or do you remember this kind of being overshadowed by Avengers Infinity War and Black Panther? How do you think back on Deadpool 2?
I remember Deadpool 2 very vividly. I remember I saw it in theaters with a couple friends. And then a week or two after, And Deadpool 2 came out like I want to say maybe a month after I graduated from high school, and I was so excited to see this movie. And then after I saw it with my friends, I wanted to take my little brother, who was like 15 or 14 at the time, and we weren't able to go because I couldn't take him because he was too young. So we ended up buying tickets for that movie Rampage. I don't know if you guys remember that movie with Dwayne Johnson.
Oh gosh, yeah,
Like-
the monkey. It was based off that video game with the monkey and everything.
Yeah. So like we bought the tickets for that, and originally my brother's like, Michael, can we just go see Rampage? I'm like, no, we're seeing Deadpool 2. So we snuck it. So we snuck into the theater, and funny enough, the lady who said that we couldn't go see Deadpool 2, she came into the theater for Deadpool 2, and I'm like, okay, just put on your hat, make sure she doesn't see us. And my brother, after the movie, my brother loved it. I was actually more excited for Deadpool 2 in 2018 than I was for Infinity War, even though I loved Infinity War.
Wow, that's really high praise for Deadpool too.
I remember being excited for it, and I remember being disappointed seeing it because, as you were mentioning, all these movies that came out, just Infinity War kind of ruined comic book movies for me because it was so good. It was like it was the peak of what comic book movies can be for me.
I agree.
Like this movie came out, and I remember seeing it, and I was just underwhelmed. Like I truly remember being like, man, this is not that. It wasn't supposed to be that, but in my mind, I was just like, I wanted Endgame. Like that was like after Infinity War came out, all I could think about was Endgame. And that hurt Captain Marvel for me. That hurt a lot of comic book movies. Didn't hurt Aquaman because I remember enjoying Aquaman for what it was. Like Aquaman is not a great movie, but it was just Jason Momoa running around yelling and talking to fish like it. But it just, I truly remember being underwhelmed watching this movie because I didn't watch it again. I watched it one more time when it came out on digital, and then I didn't watch it again until I watched it for this stream.
How about you, Ryan? What do you remember about Deadpool 2's release?
Well, I remember seeing it after Infinity War, and I remember laughing my butt off at the Thanos joke. Like, they're coming in on the orphanage, and Deadpool's like, "Zip it, Thanos!" And I remember loving that gag so hard. And I remember Deadpool 2. Like, this was 2018. I had finally, my parents were like, "All right, fine, we'll take you to R-rated movies now." I was like, "Yay!" Because it wouldn't let me see the original Deadpool in theaters.
Yeah.
When it came out, so I had to wait for home viewing.
Yeah, no, as mentioned last week, I missed Deadpool in theaters. I was not quite that R-rated age yet, but 2018, I was 19. I was ready. I went into this theater. I was excited. And, well, let's just get into it. Let's just start with Deadpool 2. Let's talk about the plot of Deadpool 2. So a couple of years have passed, and Deadpool has now been traveling the globe, killing the worst criminals out there, but always returning home to the love of his life, Vanessa, and the two are ready to start a family. But one night, Wade is followed home by one of the foes. A fight ensues, and caught in the crossfire, Vanessa is shot and killed. Even though Deadpool catches and kills the murderer, he is left in mourning and attempts at killing himself by blowing himself up, but is unsuccessful due to his regenerative abilities. X-Men Colossus member finds Wade disembodied and gathers him up, bringing him to the X-Mansion. Now an X-Men trainee, Deadpool accompanies Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead on a mission, stopping an out-of-control teenage mutant, Russell, a.k.a. Fire Fist. Russell lives in a rehabilitation center for mutants, and after learning the boy has been tortured, Deadpool kills one of the school's orderlies, getting both himself and Russell sent to a mutant prison known as the Icebox, which is where we meet Cable, a mutant cyborg from the future where Russell is now a mass murderer who kills his family. Cable is on a mission to hunt and kill Russell before he makes his first kill that sets him down his evil path. While trying to protect Russell in a fight with Cable, both Wade and Cable are thrown out of the prison, leaving Russell alone to align himself with the biggest inmate in there, Juggernaut. To stop Cable and save Russell, Deadpool puts together a team called X-Force. But on the first mission, almost all the members die during a parachute mishap, with only one member of the team surviving, a mutant saved by the power of luck known as Domino. Russell escapes with the aid of Juggernaut, and Cable realizes he must join the forces of Deadpool and Domino to stop the boy, but he agrees to give Deadpool 30 seconds to reach Russell and change his future path. Deadpool once again gets the assist of Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and the showdown takes place at Russell's old school, where he is set out to kill the headmaster. It almost seems impossible to change the boy until Cable takes a shot at him, and Deadpool jumps in front of the bullet, saving Russell's life. Deadpool dies, but Cable goes back in time, placing a skee-ball token in Deadpool's suit, saving Wade from the bullet. With Russell and Cable's futures changed, Deadpool realizes he now has a new family with these mutants. As the credits roll, and Deadpool goes to fix the timeline, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But Deadpool 2, it was released in May 15th, 2018. The budget, which the first film, I believe, had a $50 million budget we talked about, has increased now to a $110 million budget. The box office is interesting because domestically it made $324 million. Worldwide, it made $785 million, which is not very different from the original Deadpool, which made $363 million domestically and $782 million worldwide. So, with all that said, guys, what sticks out to you when you go back and you rewatch Deadpool 2? Because for me, it's definitely that budget. And it's definitely that plot. Because as we kind of went through the plot last week, pretty simple story. Wade gets his face disfigured, doesn't want to see his girl, wants to go after the guy who disfigured his face so he can then see his girl. It's a pretty simplistic story, whereas this one, there's a lot of moving elements to it, and you definitely feel it, I would say, in the first act when we're kind of going through what's Deadpool up to. We're throwing in the X-Mansion, Colossus, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Vanessa's death. We're introducing Cable. There's a lot of stuff going on in Deadpool 2 that makes it feel so much bigger than its predecessor.
Well, I guess for me, I think it's kind of the fact that, again, like you said, it's a bigger budget and it definitely looks it, both in set design and visual effects, but also it's sort of just the ensemble cast. Like all the players from the original movie, aside from Deadpool, they all get a much more beefed up roles. Like Colossus, he gets a bit more of an edge to his Boy Scout characterization, and there are some fun new characters. My personal favorite be Yukio, because she has, like, again, 90% of her dialogue is just "Hi Wade" and "Bye Wade," and yet I laugh my ass off every time. I was like, oh, this character is too pure for this.
It's so funny too, because that's a joke that it kind of feels like the movie just kind of falls into. Like when you read that on the page and the way that it's done in the scenes, like I don't know, that's such a risk of like, does this recurring thing work? Is it as funny as we think it is on set? And somehow it just does, because I'm with you, Ryan. Like every time it's "Hello, Wade. Hello, Yukio." Like every time they do it, it's just like got this endearing quality to it. It makes it kind of funny.
Yeah, I think it's the sort of the Valley Girl type inflection on the dialogue that I think really sells it as well.
Yeah, and the innocence that's there in both exchanges.
When I watched it again, I remember right when I started, I was like, "Oh man, Vanessa's gonna die," and I'm a huge Morena Baccarin fan. And when she died, I was like, "Man, that sucks." And like that's one of the reasons why I didn't enjoy this movie as much as I enjoyed the first one, because I felt like she was kind of his crux, and once she leaves, then he just is Wade Wilson for the rest of the movie. And I remember as I was watching this movie again, I was just remembering what you were talking about last week, saying he was just nonstop. And like some of the jokes hit and miss. And a lot of these hit more than, like, there were very few misses, I think, on the jokes in this one. But it was so repetitive. Like he was just going. He was just going. And I was like, man, this guy, like, I could see why he annoys the hell out of everybody because he just keeps going. And what I also didn't remember was how funny the X-Force scenes was. That was
classic.
Holy shit. That I do remember being in the theater laughing my ass off when I saw that. I was like, when they kept talking about the win, I was like, oh, these guys they're parachuting, oh, they're about to die. And I was just wondering how they would go. Like, if you've ever jumped out of an airplane, you just don't do it. Like, not over a crowded city with terrible winds. It was like, oh man, they're about to die. And the way they died was hilarious. And the Brad Pitt thing. Oh,
The
it's
Vanisher.
yeah, the Vanisher.
Maybe the wind
like-
can't blow away, can't see.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, that scene is probably one of the funniest scenes because he gives that speech before we're family, like, and I was like, as I was watching it theater, I was like, what they just got you guys just got together, and it just made it even funnier to me. Like that is one of the funniest scenes, like, because it just takes every superhero trope, forming a team like Guardians of the Galaxy in it. Like, we just formed this team and now we're a family and everybody's gonna die. And then and I can't even remember the guy's name. I want to say it's Todd, the one normal guy, or Jeff,
Peter.
I think
Peter.
all the random regular names like Peter. It's just so funny. Like, why Peter on the team? And then he goes back in time. He only saves Peter, which is even funnier. Which is like, he doesn't save the rest of the team. He just makes sure Peter's okay because he.
That was great.
Hello.
Can you give Domino my email?
Yes. Yes, and I also, Domino is such a great character. I really wish that she was coming back for Deadpool and Wolverine, which in the movie starts off with the whole Wolverine, the Logan thing.
Yes.
Rewatching it, it's a lot better than I remember it originally. It's a lot better. I would have loved Vanessa more. That's my only gripe with the movie.
Yeah, it's funny with these Deadpool movies. I'm finding that doing these rewatches, they really are like time capsules. They just take me back to those times. With like not just like where I was in life, but also just like where the superhero genre was. And like, yeah, as soon as he pulls out that Deadpool, which by the way, I want that. That's got to be like a collector's item or something, right? That like musical box with Deadpool or not Deadpool, with Logan with the piece of wood stubbed through him, like at the end of Logan, and he pushes down on it and he starts to spin and do the musical sequence. Like, I want that. I want that musical Logan box.
I think it still holds up very well. I mean, like in the last video, I told you guys I thought the first Deadpool was perfect. Like, that's an A+ for me. Love that movie. Top 5 favorite superhero films. And I watched Deadpool 2 again a couple days ago. I specifically have Deadpool 2, the super cut. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this version. It's not too different, but I think it does add a couple scenes that are a little bit better. Like, for example, in the theatrical cut, when they first meet Russell, it's just kind of abrupt, like he's already destroyed like the building and we don't really know exactly why. But in this version, there's like that scene where we get to see him at the facility and we get to see just enough of what they're doing over there, so that way in the next scene when we see him like going all crazy, it feels like there's more meat to it, rather in the theatrical cut it's just kind of abrupt. So I believe it. I think that what really stands out is that the supercut is slightly better, even though there are some scenes that I feel like didn't need to be in there. But there is a lot that I think gave like more context, which, I mean, and it's not like anybody's going to a Deadpool movie expecting like this deep emotional film, even though I kind of look at these movies that way because it can be pretty sad sometimes. Even when Ryan Reynolds is taking 10 minutes to say goodbye to people, he's like dying for 1 second. Oh, it's so hard to go.
Oh man, dude, that scene, I will admit, goes on too long.
Yeah,
it drags out a little bit too long.
It did a little bit. I also think Cable, as much as I love Josh Brolin, I think he is perfect as Cable. Like, really, like, I wasn't sure who they were going to get as Cable. When I saw that, I'm like, that's perfect. Like, that is perfect. And I think the inclusion of Cable, like, you understand his backstory between him and Russell, and it makes sense. And they even bring it up at one point, which I felt like it was just kind of a lazy way for them to make a joke out of it, where he's like, I only set this watch up for me to use it twice. And then Deadpool just goes, well, that's just lazy writing. It's like, I mean, yeah, that's lazy writing. And it's funny that they brought that up, but it's almost like it was just kind of an excuse to do that because they want to keep Cable around, which I don't know how he's going to tie into Deadpool and Wolverine. So I guess it's not going to happen. But fun fact, though, the scene where Cable goes back in time and you see those two rednecks, one of the rednecks is played by Matt Damon.
That's right.
Which I find very funny. I loved it. But no, I really do love Deadpool 2. I mean, there is a lot going on in this movie. Sometimes, like, is unlike the first film where it felt more like grounded and it was like simple. This movie just has so much going on to the point where it can be a little bit too much, but I don't think it's like a gripe that like really ruins the movie for me, but it is one of those things where like it just keeps going and going and like you don't have like a chance to breathe. Whereas in the first Deadpool film, there was a lot of moments where we actually had the time to like reconcile with everything and like take time to see what's happening next. Whereas in Deadpool 2, it's just like a clock that won't stop. It just keeps going and going. And
Yeah.
the only time you can breathe with Deadpool 2 is when the movie stops.
I definitely agree with you with that because rewatching the movie too, especially going from Deadpool straight into Deadpool 2 and rewatching them and kind of like looking at them with my reviewer mind fully engaged. Deadpool 1 is definitely tighter. It feels tighter. There's really no cracks. There's no loose bits to Deadpool 1. Deadpool 2, while I still think has a good script, I still think it's a good movie. It definitely has slower moments. It definitely has more moments where, to put it in like the best words I can, but like not meaning what I mean, is it kind of makes it feel like it's trying to be more of like a real movie. Because there is moments in this, especially like we start at the beginning when Deadpool is going around, which by the way, they've switched directors. It's no longer Tim Miller, it's David Leitch coming in here. I love the action that David Leitch brings to this franchise. When Deadpool is at the start, when he's going around the globe and he's killing all those people and he's like going after sex traffickers and all that stuff, and we see him like in Japan and Barcelona and all these different places wherever he is. That one scene, I don't know exactly where he is, but it's like maybe like Japan or whatever, when it kind of looks like he's in like a bathroom or something. There's like all these little pools going around. I'm not quite sure what it is.
It's like a spa.
It's a bathhouse.
Yeah, it's like the spa, but like the way that like the camera's moving around and circling around him, and he's chopping off the limbs, and you see the arms flying and stuff like that. Like there was moments in this where I was like, oh, I forgot that this is actually a little bit more graphic and brutal than the first film, just because they're able to do more with the effects and able to get away with more. And I think David Leitch just brings a more different style, different dynamic, but he just kind of like enhances the violence in this one for me.
Kiss me like you miss me, Red.
Welcome here.
But then he comes back and he sees Vanessa, and of course you get to the moment where Vanessa dies. And what I kind of forgot about Deadpool 2, now rewatching it, Ryan Reynolds gives a way more dramatic performance in this than he does in the first film.
Yeah.
Like there are moments in this movie where Wade feels completely different to me than in the first one, which you could say was character growth, because in the first one he's so juvenile. It doesn't really feel like he cares about anything but himself, but fixing his face, but Vanessa. And it's really interesting how they decided to go about still keeping this character sympathetic, but doing so by killing his love, who he was going to have a kid with. And now we've got Russell, who he feels this strong attachment to save and rescue. And that's kind of like the leading motivation for Deadpool throughout the entire movie. And that actually kind of surprised me rewatching it back again, because I was so used to, like in the first film, where he's just kind of jokey, doesn't really care about anything. There's nothing really that serious to him. And Ryan Reynolds, he's also out of the suit a lot more in this one than he is in the first one. We see a lot of Ryan Reynolds' face and the emotion that's on his face. He has some scenes that actually legit got me feeling the feels. There was more emotional weight put on Deadpool 2 than in the first one that I was not expecting.
Absolutely, yeah. Reynolds is a phenomenal actor. Like, a lot of people like to just look at Reynolds as just like a comedic actor. If you really look at his filmography, he is a fantastic actor. Like, he's incredible. Like movies like Buried, The Captive. I mean, he's a truly phenomenal actor. So when he shows emotions, he can really do it. And I love the fact that during all the emotional scenes, he's not wearing his suit, and you actually get to see more of his face. You get to see that Freddy Krueger topographical math looking face, what how Weasel put it. But no, he's great. I actually got in the feels a lot.
With regard to the dramatic moment, I think when he's like in the prison cell and he's just like, this is a dying man, is like, okay, kid, I am dying. I literally do not have time for this. Stop trying to antagonize everyone. You're going to die.
I loved the prison wallet bit with the pen that Russell carries around for the entire movie. Every time that pen came back around, I was laughing. I thought it was hilarious.
That's a funny scene. And you're right. Like, I think that Ryan Reynolds The death of Vanessa drove him in such a dark place, like where he really was, trying to kill himself, and things of that nature. And the inclusion of this kid who, your heart's in the wrong place, which I thought they were gonna take in a different, tone. I thought it was like I thought, he was gonna get shot and his heart was literally gonna be in the wrong place. Like they've
Oh
done
my
that in
god.
movies before. They've done that in movies before where some people have a heart on the right side. I just for some reason thought they were going to go there because they kept saying the heart's in the wrong place, and I was like, that's going to come back at some point in this movie. um but you're right, like I thought he did a really good job in a lot of the more somber scenes, and there were quite a few of those kind of lingered throughout, and then somebody would come in to kind of just bring them back to it. Like if it was Leslie Uggams telling I can't remember her name. I don't know why I can't
Blind
think of her
Owl.
name.
Blind
Yeah,
Owl, yeah.
I have blind.
she comes and gets him back right, and like they just there were those moments in the movie that you actually saw, and right, and you're right, Michael. Ryan Reynolds is a phenomenal actor. Like he really like sans Green Lantern. Let's forget that happened.
Don't make the super
He's
suit
really
green.
he's really kind of built himself up, and people don't take him seriously, unfortunately. Like everybody just sees him as the wisecracking guy in every movie because a lot of times he's that in those movies. But there are some great. Barry was phenomenal. That's like one of the top three Ryan Reynolds movies to me. And yeah, he really did show his range, and I don't remember that. I didn't remember that until I was rewatching the movie, how emotional the death of Vanessa really hit him. And you saw that a lot in the movie, which kind of helped it move along.
Going to the death of Vanessa, because I don't fully like that they kill Vanessa in the movie. I do think that the movie there is something lost with the loss of Vanessa, which I think is
Mhm.
why they in the end credits they go and save her and bring her back. And I think that she is in Deadpool Wolverine. We've seen, yeah, that's confirmed. We've seen her in the trailer. So
Yeah.
they had to bring her back because this movie does lose a little something when you kill Vanessa. But you're
Yes.
right, that scene where she gets killed, where he throws the what was it, the cheese grater or something like that at the villain.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he
cheese
shoots
spreader.
her. Yeah, the cheese. Yeah, and he shoots her, and it's like in slow motion. You see him crying over her body and yelling, and I'll tell you the moment that I felt legit like oh crap, like don't mess with Deadpool is when that villain is being chased down by him that killed Vanessa. The look on Wade's face, like the way that he just kind of goes like targets in cold blood, like there's there's no stopping this guy jumping out the window, chasing him down. When the villain, when the guy crashes his car and Deadpool realizes that he crashed the car and just like full charges goes after, I legit feel fear for this man that's just killed Vanessa, because I'm like, oh, dude, Deadpool is gonna like rip. And then it's such a subversion of expectations when he kind of just like wells up and hugs the guy, only to jump in front of a moving car and kill him that way. Like there's something so tragically sad, but also hilarious about the way that he takes that guy out, which then of course leads into the credits, which we failed to mention a little bit last week. The credit sequence at the beginning of Deadpool, where that's kind of mocking how people in Hollywood work with, like, the real heroes being the writers, and written by or directed by some tool, and all those kind of credits that were going on.
Yeah,
The Deadpool 2 credit sequence, I think, is also very brilliant because
kills me every
first of
time.
all, you get the Celine Dion song "Ashes," which is like strangely beautiful for a Deadpool film. Like, you wouldn't expect something like that in these kind of movies, which is in itself is also kind of funny.
Yeah.
With the like almost like James Bondish credit sequence going on. But I love the titles where it's like, directed by "What the Heck Just Happened," produced by "Are You Kidding Me?" and directed by one of the guys who killed John Wick's dog. Like, I love the way that they kind of have fun with the death of Vanessa with the credit sequence. It still keeps it light. It still keeps it, a Deadpool vibe that you would expect from these movies.
As far as like the way the plot unfolds, it kind of makes sense. Like it shows, because even though Wade is kind of softened up with Vanessa from the first film, it shows that he's still kind of that immature type of character that he was in the first film. He's still doing all these crazy things. So in a way, I feel like the way the plot unfolds, it was supposed to show how Wade could actually handle being a part of a family, because he had such a tragic backstory with like stuff that happened with his uncle, and then like him being abused as a child, which caused him to be that character. Which it is funny how we're taking a comedic character like Deadpool and giving him such this very deep and very disturbing backstory, especially when you read the comics. It's pretty disturbing. That's why like I feel like Deadpool is such a perfect combination between very dark reality to just being fun comic book stuff. I feel like that's a great comedic tone. But like I said, I do feel like the way Vanessa dies, I feel like it does work for the actual story itself. And then towards the end credits, which obviously we'll get to, I feel like partially there's something about that that kind of ruins it. But as I said, we'll talk about that once we get to the end credits. But I think for this specific plot, I think it was necessary. It's tragic, but there's always a moment in every superhero tale, anti-hero tale, whatever you want to call it, where a loved one dies and the character just has to deal with it and learn how to move forward. So I think it works for this film.
So I think it's an unnecessary plot device. Like it's only done to move the plot forward, which I mean, it moves the plot forward, so it does its job. I didn't want her to die. Like she's like a character I felt like is needed to ground him in for future installments. Like once she dies, like who does he become? Does he become just Wade by himself? Like that was my thought process. Like once she dies, like there's nobody there. And I was hoping that they didn't make Domino that person. Like that was my biggest fear as I was watching. It's like, all right, let's not make Domino now become, Vanessa. Like let's not do that. And they didn't, which was great because I love Domino as a character, but I don't think she needs to serve that purpose. And every time you introduce a female character in a male centered movie, you don't have to make them the love interest. Like I hate when they do that. Like we have to have a female there who now becomes, the romantic interest of this guy. And I thought that would have honestly destroyed the momentum of the movie to me, if they would have tried that. But I am glad that they went back at the end to restore that. I thought that, of course, that was hilarious watching it, but I just thought Vanessa's death was unnecessary. Like in the second part, maybe to end the trilogy, maybe I don't know, but like in the second part, like I'm just glad they course corrected because I think that he needs that character, to keep him grounded and not just be Wade Wilson out there just no purpose, because she, for all intents and purposes, is his purpose. He's doing a lot of the things he does for her, and he does everything in this movie because of her.
I don't know. I remember the first time watching it in theaters, I remember getting a little bit of tonal whiplash. I was like, and then, when the credit sequence, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or be like sad. I was like, I'm very emotionally confused right now. But looking back on it now, in rewatching, I'm like, it does open up some more interesting avenues. Again, use of the fridging trope notwithstanding, it kind of lets the writers like let free with the character and lean more into his pansexual nature. Because in the first film, it's mostly just him and Vanessa. There's a slight hint with Ed Skrein's character. Like at one point in the credits sequence, like, it's like showing the tile names and then Ed Skrein's names come up and the little cartoon Deadpool goes, he's hot. But with this one, it's like, yeah, they have a little more fun with it. Deadpool and Colossus, Deadpool and Cable. It's like, I don't know. Again, I enjoyed it a bit more. But yeah, I do admit Vanessa as a character, she does have a nice yang to Deadpool's yin. Like they're both kind of messed up in a way. Their way of flirting is talking about how horrible their childhoods were. But at the same time, she provides kind of a more sweeter contrast to his more cynical demeanor.
That's good. That's a really good way of putting it. Dace Avenue's in the chat. What's going on, buddy? He's saying that his biggest takeaway from the movie is that it's ironic that it adds vulnerability to a character that's supposed to be indestructible. Great development. That is very poetic, man. Very well
I
said.
didn't even think about that.
It's Russell, right?
Fire Fist.
Fire Fist. Ooh, that's a great name. Where does it burn? Just the fist or all the way up to the elbow?
But of course, getting rid of Vanessa, getting rid of that bond, it does create the opportunity for Deadpool to have new bonds. And let's talk about Russell, because this actor, Julian Dennison, who plays Russell, I remember I was excited when I found out that he was going to be in this movie because I took note of him first in the Taika Waititi film Hunt for the Wilder People.
Great
I don't know if
film.
you guys ever saw Hunt for the Wilder People.
I haven't.
Dude,
It's a great film.
Extremely underrated. Extremely underrated. You can kind of see why Taika Waititi went on to take over the Hollywood system when you watch his Hunt for the Wilder People. It's also got
Sam Neill.
Sam Neill,
Sam
thank
Neill,
you, Jurassic Park. Yeah, Sam Neill in it. Really fun movie. Definitely recommend checking it out. But he's really funny in it. Julian Dennison is really funny in Hunt for the Wilder People. So I was excited to see him in here playing against Ryan Reynolds. And I do think that he gets some moments where he can be really funny. As mentioned before, the prison wallet bit I think is honestly pretty great. But the whole dynamic between Deadpool and Russell, I actually think surprisingly works. Because it is kind of cliche, this kind of like lone wolf don't want to be a father, now being a father figure to this child. But by taking away Vanessa, by putting Wade in this like spot where he just kind of feels like he has no purpose, he wants to die, and then finding that purpose and wanting to help this kid be the best version of himself that he can be, it's a surprising take for the Deadpool character, especially coming off of the first one for me. Like I said, there's moments in this, and this is one in particular, where Deadpool feels like a completely different, he has more of a heart for other people and a more sympathetic spirit than he did in the first one, and that really comes through with Russell. What are you guys' thoughts on the Russell character?
Again, this time around watching the character, he's pretty nice. Again, he's not maybe my favorite character, but he still has plenty of fun moments. And when the film calls on him to bring on the dramatic thespian side, he can do it, especially when he's hunting down, the abusive headmaster. He can handle himself some dialogue pretty well. The "blessed are the wicked" line he puts 100% effort into that line delivery, and his attempt at humor are pretty funny. Just the rope bit, I don't know where that came from, but it still cracks me up.
That feels like such an improv on set moment when he just starts like pulling the rope to get away, and Deadpool's just like, "Stop it! That's not a real rope." It just feels like they're having fun on set. I really do like that moment. You do see him as like a kid. Like he does a really good job of bringing that kid-like spirit and innocence to him, which the film actually has some pretty dark moments with that when like he's in prison and that gang member punches him in the face. Like that is a moment for me where I'm like, oh crap, like they're punching this kid in the, like they're just like not pulling any punches with this kid. But he also can do that evil turn, like when he's going after the headmaster, like you mentioned. He kills it. He's legit terrifying in that moment to me. T, how does Russell work for you in this movie?
I mean, he works fairly well. I just thought it was odd as I was rewatching. I was like, why do they have this kid in this maximum security? Like he's a child in Black Tom Cassidy, which is a hilarious joke, by the way.
Oh my goodness, I laugh every time. And then later on,
you're racist.
Cable, you're racist.
Tell that to Black Tom.
But
Like,
one of the moments that I think
joke.
is kind of underrated that made me laugh so hard is when he comes up and introduces himself as Black Tom and Wade says White Wade.
Yes, yeah.
I forgot about that.
It's
Such a funny joke. Such a funny joke. But I just was thinking, like, why do they have this kid in this maximum security prison with like all of these adult men who are just gonna, like, when they call them freshmen, I was like, man, this could turn dark really quickly. Like that's terrifying. You have 14, 15-year-old kid in the jail, a supermax, prison facility that pretty much has no rules because everybody's just kind of doing whatever they want to do. I thought he was serviceable. Like I didn't really take to the character that much. I thought the him and Wade's dynamic was okay, but I don't think they shared that much time on screen together. Actually, like they didn't, like they have the prison scene, and it's like we're supposed to, feel that Wade is gonna. I guess the reason he went to prison was because he was abused as a kid, and the kid tells him he's abused. Like, I thought that was very endearing. Like, I thought that was cool. Like, that was a cool scene where he's like, oh, they, there are definitely different shades. It's not just black and white. Like, this kid is not just a menace because he's doing these things. There's a reason why he did these things. And then, of course, Wade just, in typical Wade fashion, just blows these dudes. I thought that was actually a great scene because that made sense to me for the character.
4 or 5 moments.
Yeah, exactly.
The callback to that
great
too,
callback. Great callback.
And what I love about that moment too is when he's doing the speech before he kills the guy, Colossus is standing there and he's so proud. He's like, I've made a change in this man's like he's so happy. It's so funny.
Great scene. That is the underrated scene in this movie is that 4 or 5 because course, just watching Deadpool 1, like, had I not seen Deadpool 1 last week, I probably would have forgotten that whole speech. But that's a great callback.
I actually really like Russell. The first time I saw it, in my personal opinion, I thought the way they handled the character the first time around, I felt like this kid is changing his mind way too many times. He wants to be friends with Wade. He doesn't want to be friends with Wade. It just kept going back and forth. But after watching the movie so many times after, I think it works for this character because this character has lived almost his whole life where he's had a hard time trusting people. So it would make sense for a character like him to latch on to somebody he feels like he can trust, but then like automatically switches his tone a bit. So I feel like it works. And I love all the scenes that take place in prison. I love when like he goes around the corner and Wade's like, I can hear you rummaging around in there. I love that scene. But I love the dynamic between Wade and Russell. Though I do feel that there are aspects where it does feel a little bit rushed. Like it almost feels like Russell latched onto him maybe a little too quickly. But then again, like when you have like a 2-hour film where so much stuff is happening, you're trying to like contain it. Like you don't want to spend a 2-hour movie. Like it's not like in good example like Gran Torino where Clint Eastwood becomes friends with that kid and their friendship gradually goes on. That obviously would have been too much for this movie. So I feel like it works, but there are aspects where it does feel a little bit rushed. But I don't think anybody was really complaining about that for a Deadpool film. But I love Russell. I think he's great. I think every single joke with this character lands, especially the second RoboCop reference in this movie, and like where Russell automatically knows the reference. He's like, "Come quietly, or there'll be trouble." You stole that from RoboCop. I find it funny that Russell knows that. I find it funny that Russell knows that quote, even though it's kind of clear that he's been in this institution since he was like a little kid. So I'm like, you know what? This institution is playing RoboCop, so I guess it's probably not all bad. I mean, sure, you're getting tortured. It's like
that's your bar.
Yeah, it's
an okay place because they watch RoboCop.
Yeah, it's like sure you're getting tortured because you're a mutant, just like how they did in New Mutants. If anybody ever saw New Mutants, nobody remembers it. but like. It's like, you know what? You're watching RoboCop. I think you're fine. But
what if it's RoboCop 3? Then it just adds to the torture.
No, that's the RoboCop remake you're thinking of there.
Oh, God. Well, RoboCop 2 is not that great, or the RoboCop TV series. In general, I love Russell. I think he's a great character. It's honestly kind of sad that he's not going to be in the new one, but I don't know if he is or not. Maybe I might have missed something, but love this character. Excited to hopefully see more of him. If we do get to see more of him.
Well, adding to the moving pieces of the story already with Vanessa's death, Wade becoming an X-Man, dealing with Russell, we've also got Cable. We've also got the inclusion of Cable in here, which, I mean, Josh Brolin as Cable is great. I honestly really liked going back and watching. He had a good year this year. He was in Infinity War, and then a month later, he was in this movie. Good year for Josh Brolin. One thing that surprised me going back and rewatching this movie with Cable is there's not many Terminator jokes, and this is totally just Terminator. The one joke that they do though is Deadpool refers to him as John Connor, which doesn't even really make sense. So I was kind of surprised they kind of had a missed opportunity there with the Terminator jokes. But another thing that kind of surprised me too is Cable doesn't speak very much until like the third act. Like Josh Brolin almost has like no lines until the third act, And then there's not really a villain in this movie.
No.
Like there's Russell who's going down a path, but he's not really a villain yet. And then Cable, who is the adversary to Russell and Deadpool for like the first 2 acts, but then by the 3rd act he turns friend, not foe. So it's really kind of interesting that this movie, like Ajax was the villain in the first film, and that film had a clear villain. There was a clear dynamic set up between him and Deadpool. This film doesn't really have that, and I found that really interesting going back and rewatching it. Did you guys feel that kind of absence of a real villain? Because everyone here is just more so a misunderstood character than a villain.
I don't know. I do remember like being really surprised when I first watched it and seeing Cable there being like, okay, truce. This whole antagonism thing isn't working out. I still want to kill the kid, but I'm willing to compromise a little. And even Colossus, again, while he is a antagonistic force, again, even then he's still trying to help a kid, kill an abusive, pseudo parent. So again, a little shade of gray there. But I mean, I think the headmaster does qualify as maybe not a villain, but like a villainous force. He's an end game for the character. I mean, like the film literally ends on a gag with Dope or going all Leroy Jenkins and just slamming him with a taxi. So I think the film has something of a villain.
I don't know. To me, it's kind of like Tarkin in Star Wars, where you could say Tarkin was the villain of the first Star Wars, but do you really ever think of Tarkin as the villain? You think of Darth Vader, even though really all the evil things being done is through Tarkin. So that's kind of how I see like the headmaster. Like the headmaster, you could say he is the villain because ultimately he is the end goal, but at the same time, he doesn't really have much development or character in the movie anyways. I think he's in maybe 2 scenes. So it's kind of hard to count him as like the main villain. Michael, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, there's not really a villainous presence in the film. I mean, there slightly is, but like you said, it's mostly just a collection of just broken characters. There's not really like a central main actual villain. It's kind of like Michael Bay's movie The Rock, where Ed Harris is kind of the villain, not really. Well, then again, we could say he's a villain because he's trying to blow up San Francisco. So I mean, but in a way, he's also like a very broken character, and like you could tell like he might have those tendencies, but doesn't want to act on it. He's just trying to make a point. And I feel like that's kind of like the same thing with Deadpool too. A lot of these characters are just trying to make a point, but they almost feel like that they have to go towards the slightly, villainous route in order to get that point across, which is kind of where Russell is heading. It's almost kind of like a personification of like Russell being a young kid who's being forced into a gang life, and Wade is kind of like that father figure that's trying to keep him out of that. It's almost kind of like that.
Our group will be forward thinking, gender neutral. From now on, we'll be known as X-Force.
Isn't that a little derivative?
I don't recall asking your opinion, Peter.
T kind of already alluded to it, but we got to talk about it. We got to talk about X-Force. We got to talk about the whole X-Force thing in this movie, because the funny thing that I remember when this movie was coming out that was also genius at the time was there was legit reports coming out that they were doing an X-Force movie. Like they legitimately were reporting, it was in Variety, it was in Deadline, that an X-Force movie with Deadpool was coming from Fox, and it was going to be set up in Deadpool 2. And they even had the X-Force promotional stuff in the trailer. And when I saw that X-Force scene in theaters for the first time, I don't know if I've laughed harder in a movie theater than that scene, because it is just so ridiculous and so out of nowhere that all of these characters played by pretty notable actors. You got Terry Crews in there.
Bill Skarsgård.
Bill Skarsgård is in there. Brad Pitt, as mentioned, pops up for a second as Vanisher. Like, you've got big name actors here. And then they just all die. And in my first viewing in the theater, I thought it was hilarious. This time around watching this movie, though, knowing what's coming, it's still funny, but it does stick out to me that this movie takes about 10 to 15 minutes of its running time just to set up this gag. And it just kind of like stops what's happening in the movie just so it can do this one bit. And it did kind of, I think, hurt the pacing of the film a little bit on a rewatch for me. But I mean, come on.
Oh yeah, it's still funny. Again, weirdly enough, my favorite bit is when they're recruiting Peter, and it's like, "Do you have any powers?" And he's like, "No." And then Deadpool's just like, "You're hired." And then Dopinder just throws it out. It's like,
I love that too, because Dopinder's whole motivation in this movie is to be part of the team, and they're just like, no. Oh, I love the line from Dopinder. What's your superpower? Courage. It's like, oh, that's adorable.
And then Weasel's like, "Did you make sure that you put any more napkins in the napkin dispenser?"
Which I will say, full credit where credit is due, because I kind of harped on him a little bit in the first one. I actually liked TJ Miller in this one. I thought TJ Miller, his role was a little bit more diminished than the first one, but there was some lines he had that I was like, that is legit funny. Like when he's being tortured by Cable, and Cable's like, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna bend something that shouldn't bend, and he's like, I'm gonna stop you right there because I'm not gonna make it to 2. I ain't gonna make it past 1. I laughed so hard at that. I thought that was so funny. So TJ Miller, I thought he was really quite a standout in this one, actually.
Yeah.
But go on, Ryan. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Personally, I don't think it's horribly paced. I mean, for me, like, weirdly enough, I think this is probably David Leitch's best paced movie, if not his best movie outside of the John Wick movies, because all the other movies, they have some kind of issue with either the writing or the directing, whether it's sort of the haphazard stop and go pacing, storytelling structure, or semi-thin writing. Like, again, there are some issues with Deadpool 2, for better or worse. David Leitch was probably under some creative constraints, this being a franchise film and all. But I think that might have been to his benefit with this film. But yeah, as for X-Force scene, again, it still really works well. I enjoy it. Domino is fun. Her back and forth banter trying to prove that luck is in fact a superpower is good. And Peter, like, oh, Sugar Bear with the mustache. And the sunscreen is like, I don't know about this Cable guy, but I'm sure he hasn't killed as many people as Melanoma has.
I love Peter. My favorite Peter moment, it's probably like the most like smallest moment, but my favorite Peter moment is when they're all jumping out of the helicopter and he goes and sits down on the landing bridge and then he has to get pushed off by Deadpool. I just think that's so funny.
On a rewatch, I forgot who the X-Force was. I just remember Shatterstar being part of X-Force, but I didn't remember the actor. And you got Terry Crews, you got Bill Skarsgård. And I still don't remember who the actor was who played Shatterstar, but I always loved the design of Shatterstar. Like he's such a 90s, like
looks like an anime character.
Yeah, like so
90s,
90s, like very 90s, like Rob Liefeld, who who's the person who can't draw feet, like who does it, like
right,
that is
or something like that.
I think it is Rob Liefeld. I think it is Rob Liefeld who's the animator who everybody says can't draw feet, and they have like a Deadpool Wolverine bit with him. Like
they make a joke about that in this too, that I caught too when Domino has the power of luck. He's like, who thought of that? Probably a comic writer who couldn't draw feet.
Can't draw feet. Yeah, exactly. I didn't get that upon the first
in
watch.
2018, it just went right over my head.
Right over my head. But now that was a very funny joke. But like, I love that they set it up that way because, like you said, they were talking about making an X-Force movie, and they had like individual posters of the X-Force team members, like everybody, like, oh, this is X-Force, so you're just assuming that they're gonna play this huge role in the movie, and it's gonna be some badass team up. And then when they killed them, like you said, I laughed so hard. I still laugh when I rewatch it because it's like they just get impaled, like when he sees the helicopter, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this! Like, how did like one, who thinks of this? And two, you're a genius. Like, such a funny bit, man. Like all of the different impalings and Peter and what I can't even remember the guy's name who spits the acid. Like he's like get him out the wood chipper. Zeitgeist. He tried to get him out the wood chipper. Like
we're X-Force. Oh my god!
Such a funny scene. And Deadpool just watching it all, like such a funny scene. But like Man, like I'm so glad they did that and didn't go the other way and make them a cool team, because they would have been cool, because all of the actors involved would have made a very funny like team up, kind of Guardians of the Galaxy ish.
Yeah.
But like that whole scene, that's still to this day one of the funniest comic book scenes, one of the best comic books, not just humor, just because of its creativity and how it just did something totally different.
I love the X Force. I specifically love the scene where they're finding all the people with the powers, which I've always wondered. Like, I don't understand. Like, are they just putting flyers in the city? If you have superpowers,
Oh
come
yeah,
to
I
this
think so.
come to this basement area. I love
Well,
Terry.
TJ
I-
Miller mentions LinkedIn. Time to get back on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but I love this specifically. My favorite is Terry Crews. I forgot exactly what he says. He's like, I can make you feel anxiety or something, and then Wade's like, oh, so you're basically just Dave Matthews. I'm like, oh god. And it's funny because my mom's a big Dave Matthews fan, and I grew up listening to Dave Matthews. So when he said that, I'm like, that's funny. But like, I guarantee there were so many people at the theater that were like, who the heck is Dave Matthews?
Me, that's me.
Yeah, but I love the X Force. It was something that I did not expect. I mean, so even though I was a big comic book reader, I didn't really know too much about the X Force. I knew a little bit about them because I was a big Deadpool fan, but they were not really anything that was just different compared to other superhero team like superhero teams. Like there was really nothing about them, so I was kind of just like, oh, X Force is going to be in the movie. Interesting. I didn't really know most of them, so when that scene happened, I mean, very similar to what you guys said, I was shocked. Everybody in my theater, their mouths were dropped to the ground. I'm like, I did not expect that, but I'm glad I didn't expect that because that was perfect. I mean, I don't know if I could have really imagined the entire movie with the X Force as much as I thought they were all great. I feel like that'd be really cool to see maybe like in another film, which I don't know if they would ever really do. But I think just that scene happening alone was perfect. Whoever wrote that scene specifically, it was, well, I mean, they already answered that question. It was written by the real heroes, so I guess we can thank the real heroes for that perfect scene.
Look, eventually, you're gonna hang up the claws, and it's gonna make a lot of people very sad.
Huh?
But one day, your old pal Wade's gonna ask you to get back in the saddle again. When he does, say yes.
And I also want to kind of talk about that post-credit scene, because the post-credit scene here where they fix Cable's device, the time travel device, and Deadpool goes through all these different scenarios, going back and killing the X-Men Origins Deadpool, killing Ryan Reynolds, reading the script of Green Lantern is probably the biggest laugh I got when this happened in the theater. But this is almost a pretty happy coincidence, because at this time, the talks of Disney acquiring Fox were happening. But I mean, the TVA wasn't around, Marvel wasn't doing multiverse, so the whole idea of like, do you think that this is how it's going to lead into Deadpool and Wolverine? Like the whole reason that the TVA come to get Deadpool, do you think it'll be because he's been messing around with the timeline from Cable's device? Because I think they have the perfect segue right here that they just kind of fell into to set that up for Deadpool and Wolverine.
I absolutely agree. It does have to do with Wade kind of messing up with the timeline. It's very similar to what happened in No Way Home and what happened in the Flash movie, which I know for a fact, the writers of Deadpool 2 did not plan that because, during when they were filming during when Deadpool 2 came out, they were filming Spider-Man Far From Home. So they had really nothing to do with the whole multiverse thing, which has been happening a lot in these movies and TV shows lately. So I think it was a perfect coincidence, if that makes sense. I feel like when they did that, they realized, like, obviously with the Flash, with Spider-Man No Way Home, and what's happening in Loki, it's like, okay, we did this as a joke, but we can use this to our advantage to actually make it the main story and focal point of Deadpool and Wolverine. So it's a perfect accident. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah, 20th Century Fox kind of gave Disney an unintentional gift there. It's like, hey, this character can travel through time. Disney, we have this thing called TVA, which, again, I have never seen the Loki show, so I know absolutely nothing about it, but beyond what you've told me. So it's like, hey, yeah, this will work.
it makes perfect sense. The TVA, with Vanessa being back, she's a variant now. Like all of
Yeah.
these TVA references. So I can see him fighting to keep her alive, like because they're gonna come and want to do it at pruner, as they say, or not. Like it could go totally different the other way. But that was a softball that they just threw up there, and like I said, they got lucky. I definitely know that they didn't know the plan because I don't think Marvel knew the plan. When this
No
movie
way.
was being
No
made.
way.
If they did, bless them. But I doubt that. But
They
it
didn't even, they
is
didn't even know that they were gonna have these characters. They didn't even know if the Fox deal was gonna go through yet at this point. So like, there's no way.
exactly.
There's no way they hinged
Yeah.
all their bets on that. No way.
I mean, hey, hindsight being, I would say I knew. I was like, if I was Ryan Reynolds, like I knew this was gonna happen. I knew time travel was gonna play a big role in Phase 20 of Marvel. It has to tie in that way, but then again, it might not. Who knows? Uh, I'm just, I'm ready for it. After watching this, I'm ready for Deadpool and Wolverine.
How would you guys recommend Deadpool 2?
I'm gonna give it a solid recommend. I didn't think it was as good as the first one. I thought the first one was, because you went in with no expectations, it just exceeded anything you could have thought of. But I thought people went into Deadpool 2 wanting bigger, wanting better, and it was. But I just didn't think it landed with all of its humor as much as the first one did with me, at least. And it was a lot more. This was a more depressing movie than the first one. This was
Yeah.
very like
A little bit.
it was a little darker, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but might not be what you're looking for in a Deadpool movie.
I'd say a solid recommend as well. Again, this film is very funny, but there are some of the jokes that I feel like a lot of the MCU references at the time in 2018, back when the MCU was like at the peak of the cultural zeitgeist, they worked pretty well. But now it's like, I don't know, they're kind of just awkward dead air moments. It's like, oh yeah, that was a thing, right? Yeah. Plus, I don't know. It's kind of funny. I think this film is better structured than the original, but weirdly enough, I prefer the original. It's kind of like the Top Gun versus Top Gun Maverick. The original is the more beloved, but more structurally messy, like the awkward third act with China being a sudden adversary, whereas Maverick is more structurally coherent, but people still like Top Gun original better. I feel like that situation is with Deadpool and Deadpool 2, but I still enjoyed Deadpool 2.
I'd say solid recommend. If it were on my channel, I'd give it like a B plus or an A. I really do enjoy the film. There are a couple times where the movie can feel unfocused because the first Deadpool film, that had one storyline. That was a very focused film. Deadpool 2, there's too much going on to the point where it can become a little bit of a headache for me. So, and there's just some aspects that I didn't really enjoy with certain characters, but still love it. Still would give it a very strong recommend. I'd say strong, solid recommend.
I'm going to follow everyone here. I'm going to give it as well a solid recommend. I think that everything that's said here, I agree with. Deadpool 1 is just such a tighter story, such a tighter script. It's basically just like nonstop jokes all the way through for Deadpool, which just makes it feel like this fun ride that never stops, and it's over before you even know it. Deadpool 2 still has those funny moments and still has some great humor, but it also does do more with its story. It tries to accomplish more. It goes bigger. It adds way more characters, which are fun characters, but I do feel the pacing takes a hit for it. And because of those slower moments and because it's hitting that emotional beat, it's not as consistently funny as I find the first one, as well as the whole, what Ryan was mentioning, kind of similar to the first one as well. It's a time capsule. It takes place at a certain time. If you were around that time, you're going to get more out of it than if you're watching it for the first time. The Logan musical box is great. All the mentions of the DCU, or the DCEU, I should say, what was going on in the MCU at the time, what was going on in comic book movies at the time. It's a nice revisit to that time, but it also does age the movie a bit, just like how I feel the first one is aged a bit from being a time capsule of when it came out. So yeah, still a solid recommend. Still really enjoy this movie. I honestly don't know if I liked it more or less than the first one. I think it might be a slight lower solid recommend than the first one for me, but still a great time. I still really enjoy going back and revisiting it. And guys, next time we talk about Deadpool, it's going to be with his pal Wolverine, because we're going to be doing the Deadpool and Wolverine spoiler discussion
Gonna be so fun.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. Spoiler Kings are in here. What's going on, guys? Thanks for hanging out with us. She's saying, cannot wait for Deadpool and Wolverine. I need that popcorn bucket. Does anyone have that popcorn bucket on order?
Not yet.
Yeah. Oh, man, I want to get that so bad. But yeah, guys, we will be back next weekend to talk about Logan. And then, guys, it's Deadpool and Wolverine. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys so much for being members. We'll see you guys again next week for Logan. Take care.